When HOA President Karen lied to get my 12-year-old son kicked out of first class, she thought she'd won. But her cruel deception was exposed within minutes. As airport security escorted her off the plane, Tommy and I reclaimed our seats, while she lost her $10,000 cruise vacation forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. My name is David Martinez and I work as a software engineer for a big tech company in San Francisco. I am 34 years old and I have been raising my 12-year-old son Tommy by myself for the past 2 years. After working countless overtime hours and saving every penny I could, I finally had enough money to take Tommy on his dream vacation to Disney World in Orlando, Florida. Tommy had been begging me to take him there since he was 6 years old, and I wanted to make this trip absolutely perfect and unforgettable for him. I made the decision to surprise Tommy by booking us first-class seats on the airplane, even though it cost me almost $3,000 extra. That was a huge amount of money for someone like me, but seeing the pure joy and excitement on my son's face would be worth every single penny. Tommy had never experienced anything luxurious like flying first class before, and I wanted him to feel special and important. He had been through such a difficult and emotional year after his mother and I went through a messy divorce, and he deserved to experience something truly wonderful and magical. The divorce had been incredibly hard on both of us, but especially on Tommy. His mother had decided to move to another state with her new boyfriend, which meant that Tommy only got to see her during summer vacations and major holidays. He was a quiet, sensitive and thoughtful kid who loved reading fantasy books, playing video games, and building elaborate Lego creations. He never caused any trouble at home or at school, and he always got excellent grades. All he really wanted in life was to feel loved, appreciated, and special. We live in a suburban neighborhood called Sunset Hills, where every single house looks like it came straight out of a home and garden magazine. The Homeowners Association controls absolutely everything in our community, from what color you can paint your front door to exactly how tall your grass is allowed to grow. The HOA president is a woman named Karen Williams, and she is honestly the most unpleasant, mean-spirited and controlling person I have ever had the misfortune to meet in my entire life. Karen is 55 years old, with short, perfectly styled blonde hair that never has a single strand out of place, and cold blue eyes that always seem to be looking for something to criticize or complain about. She walks around our neighborhood every single day like she personally owns every house, every tree and every blade of grass. She carries a clipboard with her everywhere she goes, constantly writing down violations and preparing to send out nasty letters to anyone who dares to break even the smallest rule. Karen had been making my life absolutely miserable ever since Tommy and I moved to Sunset Hills 3 years ago. She would send me official complaint letters about everything imaginable. My grass was half an inch too long, my car was parked 6 inches over the property line, my trash cans were supposedly the wrong shade of black, my garden hose was visible from the street. She seemed to genuinely enjoy finding reasons to fine people hundreds of dollars and make their lives as difficult as possible. But the worst part of Karen's behavior was how she treated my innocent son Tommy. Whenever she saw him playing outside with his friends, riding his bike on the sidewalk or just walking to the school bus stop, she would march over and yell at him for the tiniest, most ridiculous things. Once she screamed at him for a full 15 minutes because he had accidentally stepped on the very edge of her perfectly manicured lawn while chasing a soccer ball that had rolled into her yard. Tommy came home that day with tears in his eyes, asking me why the mean lady hated him so much and what he had done wrong. I tried my best to avoid Karen as much as possible, but it was incredibly difficult when she lived just 2 houses down from us on the same street. She would stand in her front yard every morning at exactly 7 o'clock and every evening at exactly 6 o'clock, watching everyone like a security guard, looking for any possible reason to complain or cause problems for her neighbors. On the morning of our flight to Florida, both Tommy and I were feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. We had spent the previous evening packing our suitcases very carefully, making sure we had everything we needed for 5 days at Disney World. Tommy had barely slept the night before because he was so excited about the trip. He kept talking non-stop about all the amazing rides he wanted to go on, all the Disney characters he hoped to meet, and all the souvenirs he wanted to buy. We took a taxi to San Francisco International Airport very early in the morning, just as the sun was starting to rise over the city. Tommy pressed his face against the taxi window the entire way, watching the buildings and traffic go by, asking me dozens of questions about flying, about Disney World, and about what our hotel would look like. His excitement and enthusiasm were absolutely contagious, and I felt my own heart fill with joy seeing him so happy and full of anticipation. When we arrived at the massive airport, Tommy was completely amazed by how huge and busy it was. There were thousands of people rushing around with their suitcases, dozens of shops and restaurants, and enormous windows that let in bright sunlight. He had only flown twice before in his life, both times in cramped economy seats for short business trips to visit his grandmother, so everything about this experience felt new, exciting, and special to him. We checked in at the airline counter without any problems, and the friendly agent smiled when she saw our first-class boarding passes. "You two are going to have a wonderful flight," she said to Tommy. "First-class passengers get special treatment." Tommy's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? What kind of special treatment?" "You'll have to wait and see," the agent said with a wink. After going through security, we found our departure gate and sat down to wait for our flight. I decided this was the perfect time to show Tommy our boarding passes and reveal the surprise I had been keeping secret. "Tommy, look at these," I said, handing him both boarding passes. Tommy looked at them carefully, and suddenly his eyes got huge and his mouth dropped open. "Dad, are you serious? These say first class. We're really going to fly first class." "That's absolutely right, buddy. I wanted to make this trip extra special for you," I said, smiling at his incredible reaction. Tommy jumped up from his seat and hugged me as tight as he could. "This is the best day of my entire life. Wait until I tell all my friends at school about this." We sat back down to continue waiting for our flight, and Tommy couldn't stop looking at our boarding passes over and over again, talking excitedly about how amazing it was going to be to sit in the fancy leather seats at the front of the airplane. Other passengers were starting to arrive at our gate, and I noticed families with small children, business people in expensive suits, and elderly couples who were probably heading to Florida for their winter vacation. Then I saw something that made my heart sink with dread. Karen Williams was walking toward our gate, pulling a large, expensive-looking suitcase behind her. She was wearing a designer outfit that probably cost more than I make in a week, and she had her usual angry, disapproving expression on her face. My stomach dropped when I realized that she was probably going to be on the exact same flight as Tommy and me. Tommy noticed her at the same time I did, and I watched his happy, excited expression immediately change to worry and fear. "Dad, why is she here?" he whispered to me, scooting closer to my chair. "It's probably just a coincidence, son. Don't worry about it at all. She can't possibly ruin our vacation," I said, trying to sound much more confident than I actually felt inside. Karen looked around the crowded waiting area, and her cold eyes stopped moving when she spotted Tommy and me sitting together. Her face somehow managed to get even angrier than usual, and she marched directly over to where we were sitting like she was on some kind of mission. "Well, well, well," she said in her nastiest, most condescending voice. "If it isn't David Martinez and his little brat. What in the world are you two doing here at this gate?" "We're going on vacation to Disney World in Orlando," I replied as calmly as possible, trying my best not to let her see how much her presence was already annoying me. Karen's sharp eyes immediately focused on the boarding passes that Tommy was still holding tightly in his small hands. Her eyes got wide with shock and disbelief when she saw the first-class designation printed clearly on both passes. "First class? You have got to be kidding me," she said with a mean, nasty laugh that made several other passengers turn around to stare at us. "People like you absolutely do not belong in first class. Those seats are reserved for important, successful people, not for single fathers who can't even keep their lawns properly trimmed according to HOA regulations." I felt my anger starting to rise like hot lava in my chest, but I absolutely did not want to cause a scene in front of Tommy and all the other innocent passengers who were just trying to wait peacefully for their flights. "Karen, we paid for our seats exactly the same way everyone else did. Please just leave us alone so we can enjoy our vacation." "I don't think that's going to happen," she said, raising her voice even louder so that more people would stare at us. "I am also flying first class on this aircraft, and I absolutely do not want to sit anywhere near you and your annoying, disruptive child for 5 long hours. That boy is probably going to be loud and obnoxious the entire flight, disturbing all the other first-class passengers who paid good money for a peaceful experience." Tommy looked down at his feet, and I could see that all of his earlier excitement and joy had completely disappeared. Karen's cruel words were hurting his feelings deeply, and seeing my son's pain made me angrier than anything she had ever said or done to me personally. "My son is extremely well behaved, and we have just as much right to be on this flight as anyone else," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll just see about that," Karen said with an evil, satisfied smile. Then she turned around and walked directly to the gate counter to speak with the airline employees. I watched nervously as Karen spoke animatedly with the gate agent, pointing at Tommy and me several times during their conversation. The young gate agent looked increasingly confused and kept shaking her head, but Karen kept talking louder and more aggressively, clearly not accepting no for an answer. Other passengers in the waiting area started staring at the commotion she was causing, and I felt embarrassed and worried about what she might be telling them about us. After about 10 or 15 minutes of heated discussion, Karen finally walked back over to where Tommy and I were sitting. She had a smug, triumphant look on her face that told me she thought she had accomplished exactly what she wanted. "I just finished speaking with the gate agent about the situation," she announced loudly enough for half the waiting area to hear her. "I informed them that your son has been acting completely inappropriately and disturbing other passengers in the gate area. As a result, they have agreed to move both of you to economy class where you clearly belong." "That is a complete and total lie," I said, standing up quickly. "Tommy hasn't done a single thing wrong. He has been sitting quietly in his chair this entire time, not bothering anyone." "Prove it," Karen said with the nastiest, most satisfied smile I had ever seen. "It's my word against yours, and I am a respected, upstanding member of our community. I am the president of our homeowners association, and I have a perfect reputation with no history of complaints or problems." I couldn't believe what was happening to us. This evil woman was so cruel and vindictive that she was actually willing to lie to airline employees just to ruin my son's dream vacation. I looked down at Tommy, who was now trying desperately not to cry in front of all the strangers who were watching our family get publicly humiliated. The gate agent, a young woman who looked very uncomfortable and unhappy about the whole situation, slowly walked over to where we were sitting. "Sir, I'm really sorry about this, but we have received a formal complaint about disruptive behavior," she said quietly, clearly not wanting to make the situation any worse. "We're going to need to move you and your son to different seats in the economy section of the aircraft." "This is absolutely ridiculous," I said, trying to control my anger and frustration. "My son hasn't done anything wrong at all. This woman is lying because she has a personal grudge against our family from our neighborhood." The gate agent looked genuinely unsure about what to do. "I'm very sorry, sir, but company policy requires us to take all passenger complaints seriously. We do have 2 seats available together in economy class." Karen stood there with her arms crossed over her chest, looking extremely pleased with herself and her victory. She had won this battle and she knew it perfectly well. Tommy was now crying softly, trying his best to hide his tears from all the other passengers who were watching our family get humiliated in public. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered gently to Tommy, putting my arm around his shoulders. "We're still going to Disney World and we're still going to have the most amazing time together." But I could see clearly in his eyes that the magic and excitement of the trip had already been severely damaged. Karen had managed to take something incredibly special away from my innocent son, and I felt completely helpless to stop her or fix the situation. Tommy and I sadly gathered our carry-on bags and followed the apologetic gate agent to get our new boarding passes for economy class seats. As we walked away from our original seats, I could hear Karen laughing with satisfaction behind us. She had gotten exactly what she wanted. She had successfully hurt my family and made herself feel powerful and important. The gate agent handed us our new boarding passes with a genuinely apologetic expression on her face. "I'm really truly sorry about this situation, sir. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions to ensure all passengers feel comfortable during their flight." "I understand that you're just doing your job," I said, even though I was absolutely furious inside. "But I want you to know that woman lied about my son. He's a good, well-behaved kid who absolutely doesn't deserve to be treated like this." Tommy and I found 2 empty seats near the back of the gate waiting area. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve and tried his best to be brave, but I could tell that his heart was completely broken. The first-class experience that he had been so incredibly excited about was gone, stolen by a cruel woman who seemed to enjoy hurting children for no reason at all. "Dad, why does she hate us so much?" Tommy asked quietly, his voice still shaky from crying. "Some people are just mean and unhappy, son. They're not satisfied with their own lives, so they try to make other people as miserable as they are. But we're absolutely not going to let her ruin our vacation, okay? We're still going to have an amazing time at Disney World." Tommy nodded bravely, but I could see that he was still deeply upset and hurt. We sat there for another hour waiting for our flight to begin boarding. I watched Karen sitting comfortably in the first-class boarding area, looking very pleased with herself and occasionally glancing over at us with that same evil smile. When the airline staff finally started the boarding process, first-class passengers were called to board first, just as they always are. Karen walked past our seats with her nose high in the air, making absolutely sure that we saw her getting the special, privileged treatment that should have been ours. Tommy watched her walk by, and I saw a flash of anger and hurt in his young eyes that absolutely broke my heart. We boarded the plane with all the other economy passengers and found our assigned seats near the back of the aircraft. They were much smaller, more cramped, and less comfortable than the spacious first-class seats would have been. Tommy squeezed into the window seat and pressed his face against the small glass window, trying his best to regain some of his original excitement about flying to Florida. As the plane was going through its final preparations for takeoff, I started hearing some kind of commotion coming from the front of the cabin where the first-class section was located. Flight attendants were talking to each other in urgent, worried whispers, and there seemed to be some kind of serious problem developing. I couldn't hear exactly what was happening, but several crew members were walking back and forth looking very concerned and stressed about something. Then I saw one of the flight attendants walking quickly toward the back of the plane where economy passengers were seated. She was looking around carefully at seat numbers, clearly searching for someone specific. She stopped directly at our row and smiled warmly at Tommy and me. "Excuse me, are you David and Tommy Martinez?" she asked very politely. "Yes, that's us," I replied, wondering what could possibly be wrong now. "There has been a significant situation with some of the first-class seating assignments," she explained carefully. "We need to move you both back to your original first-class seats immediately." I was completely confused and didn't understand what was happening. "I don't understand what you mean." "We were specifically told that we had to move to economy class because of a formal complaint about our behavior." The flight attendant looked uncomfortable and chose her words very carefully. "There was a serious misunderstanding earlier that has now been resolved. Your original first-class seats are available again, and we need you to move back to first class right away." Tommy looked at me with hope beginning to return to his eyes. "Dad, does this mean we actually get to sit in first class after all?" "I think it does, buddy," I said, still not completely understanding what had happened but feeling happy to see Tommy's excitement starting to come back. We quickly gathered our belongings and followed the flight attendant toward the front of the plane. As we walked past all the other economy passengers, I could see them looking at us curiously, probably wondering why we were being moved to the expensive seats while everyone else had to stay in the back. When we reached the first-class section, I immediately saw our original seats, two beautiful, wide leather chairs with plenty of legroom and personal television screens. But I also noticed something very important. Karen's seat was completely empty. There was no sign of her anywhere in the first-class cabin, and her expensive luggage was nowhere to be seen. "Excuse me, where did the woman go who was sitting in first class earlier?" I asked the flight attendant as she helped Tommy get settled into his seat. The flight attendant smiled, but it wasn't a particularly happy smile. "Ms. Williams is no longer traveling on this flight," she said simply and professionally. "What exactly do you mean when you say she's no longer on the flight?" I asked, becoming more curious. "I'm not supposed to discuss specific details about other passengers' situations," the flight attendant replied diplomatically. "But I can tell you generally that sometimes people's behavior catches up with them in unexpected ways." Tommy was already busy exploring all the amazing features of his first-class seat, pressing buttons, adjusting the position, and examining the personal entertainment system. His excitement and joy were clearly returning, and he seemed to have completely forgotten about Karen and her cruel treatment of us earlier. As our plane took off into the clear blue sky, I couldn't stop wondering what exactly had happened to Karen. Had she suddenly gotten sick? Had she somehow missed the flight? Had there been some kind of family emergency? It seemed very strange and unusual that she would just completely disappear after working so hard to get Tommy and me kicked out of first class. About an hour into the flight, during the elaborate meal service that first-class passengers receive, I happened to overhear two flight attendants having a quiet conversation near the galley area where they prepare food and drinks. "I honestly can't believe that someone would fake a complaint like that about a child," one of them said quietly. "The captain was absolutely furious when he found out what really happened," the other flight attendant replied. "He said that people who lie to airline staff in order to hurt other innocent passengers should definitely face serious consequences for their actions." Well, she certainly faced consequences today. Being removed from the flight and permanently banned from flying with our airline is pretty serious punishment. I suddenly realized that they were talking about Karen Williams. Somehow, the airline staff had discovered that she had lied about Tommy's behavior, and they had removed her from the flight as punishment for her dishonesty. I felt a wonderful sense of justice and satisfaction that I hadn't expected to experience. Tommy was having the absolute time of his life in first class. The friendly flight attendants brought him special snacks, unlimited drinks, warm cookies, and extra pillows and blankets. He watched 2 different movies on his personal screen and kept turning to me every few minutes with a huge smile on his face, saying, "Dad, this is so incredibly cool, and I can't believe how awesome this is." I'm so glad you're having fun, buddy, I said, feeling my heart fill with happiness. You absolutely deserve this special treatment. How did we get our first-class seats back? Tommy asked curiously. Did that mean lady suddenly change her mind about us? Sometimes when people do bad things to others, they end up getting punished for their actions, I explained carefully. The airline discovered that she had lied about your behavior, and they didn't like that very much at all. Tommy thought about this explanation for a moment. So she actually got in trouble for being mean to us? That's exactly right, son. And now we get to enjoy our flight exactly the way we originally planned. The rest of our flight to Orlando was absolutely wonderful and perfect. Tommy tried every single snack and meal they offered, watched 3 different movies, played games on his entertainment system, and even took a comfortable nap in his spacious, reclining seat. I spent the time reading a book, relaxing, and thinking about how quickly and dramatically things had changed for us. One moment we were humiliated and sitting in cramped seats at the back of the plane, and the next moment we were enjoying the luxury and comfort that we had originally paid for. When our plane finally landed at Orlando International Airport, Tommy was practically bouncing up and down with excitement and energy. Dad, that was honestly the best flight of my entire life. Can we please try to fly first class on every trip from now on? We'll see, son. First class is very expensive, but maybe we can do it again for other special trips and vacations. As we collected our luggage from the baggage claim area, I found myself still wondering what exactly had happened to Karen. Had she managed to find another flight to Florida? Was she stuck back in San Francisco? Part of me felt slightly sorry for her, but mostly I was just grateful and relieved that her attempt to ruin our family vacation had completely backfired on her. Tommy and I took a shuttle bus to our hotel near Disney World, and he pressed his face against the window the entire way, pointing excitedly at palm trees, pointing at other hotels, and asking dozens of questions about what we would do first at the theme parks. His enthusiasm and excitement were absolutely contagious, and I felt incredibly grateful that our day had ended so much better than it had started. That evening, as we were checking into our hotel and getting settled in our room, I received a phone call from my neighbor Mrs. Peterson, who lived right next door to us back in Sunset Hills. David, I hope you don't mind me calling you while you're on vacation, but I heard the most interesting and surprising news about Karen Williams today, she said with obvious excitement in her voice. What kind of news? I asked, immediately curious. Well, apparently she was actually removed from an airplane today for lying to airline staff about another passenger. The story is already spreading all around our neighborhood like wildfire. One of the other neighbors saw airport security officers escorting her out of the terminal. I couldn't help but smile widely. Is that really what happened? Yes, and there's even more to the story. The airline has permanently banned her from ever flying with them again. She had to buy a very expensive last-minute ticket on a completely different airline, and she won't arrive in Florida until tomorrow evening. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that she was supposed to be going on some incredibly expensive luxury cruise that leaves Miami tomorrow morning. So she's going to miss her entire cruise vacation? I asked. That's exactly what everyone is saying. Apparently, the cruise line has a strict policy and won't refund her money either, since it's not their fault that she got kicked off her flight for bad behavior. I felt an even stronger sense of justice and satisfaction than what I had experienced on the airplane. Karen had tried to ruin Tommy's dream vacation, and instead she had completely ruined her own expensive trip. Mrs. Peterson, how did you manage to find out all these specific details? I asked. Oh, you know how fast news travels in our neighborhood, especially when it's about Karen. Plus, Karen's sister lives just 3 streets over from us, and she's been telling everyone about how embarrassed and upset the whole family is about this situation. Apparently, Karen called her sister crying and screaming about how unfair everything was and how she was the real victim. After I hung up the phone, I sat on the comfortable hotel bed next to Tommy, who was looking through a colorful Disney World guidebook and carefully planning our detailed itinerary for the next day. Dad, look at this amazing roller coaster, he said enthusiastically, pointing to a picture of a huge ride. It goes upside down 3 different times. That looks pretty scary to me, I said with a smile. Are you sure you're brave enough to handle something like that? I'm brave enough for anything now, Tommy said with complete confidence. This is going to be the best vacation of my entire life. Looking at my son's happy, excited face, I realized that Karen's cruel attempt to hurt us had actually made our trip even more special and meaningful. Tommy now had an incredible story to tell about how we got upgraded back to first class, and he felt like he had been treated like a true VIP by the airline staff. Over the next 5 magical days, Tommy and I had the most incredible vacation at Disney World. We rode every single roller coaster and thrill ride, met all the famous Disney characters and got their autographs, ate way too much ice cream and cotton candy and other delicious treats, and bought souvenirs that we'll treasure forever. Tommy's absolute favorite attraction was the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which we ended up going on 4 different times because he loved it so much. Every single night, Tommy would call his best friends back home to tell them about all of our amazing adventures and experiences. He especially loved sharing the story about what happened on the airplane and how the mean HOA lady got kicked off the flight for lying about him. And then the flight attendants moved us back to first class and gave me unlimited free cookies and my own personal blanket and pillow, he would say excitedly into the phone. On our last day in Florida, as we were sadly packing our suitcases to return home, Tommy gave me the biggest, tightest hug. Dad, thank you so much for giving me the best vacation ever. Even when that mean lady tried to ruin everything for us, you made sure we still had the most amazing time. That's what fathers are for, buddy, I said, hugging him back just as tight. And you know what? I think that mean lady learned a very important lesson about what happens when you try to hurt other people. Do you think she'll still be mean to us when we get back home to our neighborhood? Tommy asked. I honestly don't know, son. But if she is, we'll handle it together as a team. And now you know from personal experience that sometimes when people do bad things, they end up getting punished for their actions. Our flight home to San Francisco was just as wonderful and comfortable as our flight to Florida had been. We flew first class again, and Tommy was now an expert at using all the fancy amenities and features. The flight attendants remembered us from our trip down to Florida and made sure that Tommy received extra special attention, snacks, and treats. When we finally landed back in San Francisco, Tommy was tired but incredibly happy. He had a large bag completely full of Disney souvenirs and a head full of amazing memories that would last him a lifetime. As we took a taxi home from the airport, he was already starting to plan ideas for our next family vacation. Dad, can we please go back to Disney World every single year? He asked sleepily. We'll see, buddy. Maybe we can take turns visiting lots of different exciting places around the world. When we finally arrived home to our house in Sunset Hills, it was late in the evening and everything looked exactly the same as when we had left. But somehow I felt like everything was completely different now. Tommy and I had been through an incredible adventure together, and we had come out of it much stronger as a family. The next morning, as I was unpacking our suitcases and doing laundry, Mrs. Peterson came over to welcome us home and hear all about our trip to Disney World. How was your vacation, Tommy? She asked with a warm smile. It was the most amazing thing ever. We rode Space Mountain and the Tower of Terror, and we met Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, and we ate these enormous turkey legs that were bigger than my head. Tommy said, bouncing around the living room with endless energy and excitement. That sounds absolutely wonderful, dear. And how was your airplane flight? Tommy's eyes immediately lit up with excitement. Oh, Mrs. Peterson, you should have seen what happened. The mean HOA lady tried to get us kicked out of first class by lying about me, but then she got in huge trouble and they kicked her off the whole entire airplane instead. Mrs. Peterson smiled knowingly. Yes, I heard about that incident. The whole neighborhood has been talking about it for days. Is she back home yet? I asked. Oh yes, she finally got back 2 days ago. But she's been hiding inside her house ever since then. I think she's very embarrassed about what happened and how everyone found out. Plus, she lost thousands and thousands of dollars on that luxury cruise she missed. I felt completely satisfied knowing that Karen had faced real, serious consequences for her cruel actions. It wasn't that I wanted her to suffer unnecessarily, but I was genuinely glad that Tommy had seen with his own eyes that bullies and mean people don't always win in the end. Over the next several weeks, life in our Sunset Hills neighborhood was much more peaceful and pleasant than it had been in years. Karen still lived just 2 houses down from us, but she completely stopped sending complaint letters about minor violations, and she stopped yelling at Tommy when he played outside with his friends. Maybe she had finally learned her lesson about treating people with respect, or maybe she was just too embarrassed about the airport incident to continue her bullying behavior. Tommy went back to school and told all his classmates and friends about our incredible Disney World adventure. His teacher was so impressed that she asked him to give a special presentation to the entire class about his vacation experiences. He stood up in front of everyone and confidently told the whole story of our trip, including the dramatic part about Karen getting removed from the airplane for lying. My dad taught me that when people are mean to others, sometimes bad things happen to them instead, Tommy told his fascinated classmates. And that's exactly what happened to the mean HOA lady who tried to ruin our vacation. His teacher later told me that Tommy's confidence and self-esteem had really grown significantly since our trip. He seemed much happier, more secure, and more outgoing, knowing that his father would always protect him and that bullies don't always get their way in life. A few months later, there was an official HOA election in our neighborhood. Karen decided to run for president again, but she lost by an absolutely huge margin. Everyone had heard about what happened at the airport, and they didn't want someone who would lie and hurt innocent children to be their community leader. The new HOA president was Mr. Johnson, a kind, fair man with grandchildren of his own who actually understood what families needed. One of his very first official acts was to reduce the number of petty, ridiculous rules and focus on things that actually mattered, like keeping our neighborhood safe and maintaining the common areas that everyone could enjoy. Tommy and I still live happily in Sunset Hills, and we still occasionally see Karen when we're out walking our dog or playing in the yard. She doesn't bother us anymore, and she seems to have learned that her behavior has real consequences. Sometimes I catch her watching Tommy play with his friends, and I wonder if she ever feels genuinely sorry for how cruelly she treated him. Tommy is now 13 years old, and he's grown into a confident, happy teenager who stands up for himself and others. He still talks about our Disney World trip as one of the best experiences of his entire life. More importantly, he learned that sometimes standing up to bullies and doing the right thing leads to positive outcomes and justice. Last month, Tommy asked me if we could start planning another special vacation together. "Where do you want to go this time?" I asked him. "I don't really care where we go, Dad. I just want to make sure we fly first class again," he said with a big grin. "We'll see what we can do about that," I said, ruffling his hair affectionately. As I think back on that crazy dramatic day at the airport, I realize that Karen Williams actually did our family a tremendous favor, even though that certainly wasn't her intention. She tried to ruin our vacation and hurt my son, but instead she made our trip more memorable, meaningful, and special than it ever would have been otherwise. Tommy learned that his father would always fight for him and protect him, and that good people usually win in the end when they stand up for what's right. Karen learned that being cruel to innocent children has serious consequences, and that lying to get what you want can backfire in the most spectacular ways imaginable. She lost her expensive cruise vacation, got permanently banned from a major airline, and became our neighborhood's cautionary tale about what happens when you abuse your power and authority. The airline staff learned to be more careful and thorough about investigating complaints before taking action against innocent passengers. And Tommy and I learned that sometimes the best family memories come from overcoming challenges and difficulties together as a team. Every time we walk past Karen's house now, Tommy smiles politely and waves in a friendly way. He's not afraid of her anymore, and neither am I. We both know that we can handle whatever life throws at us, whether it's mean HOA presidents, bullies at school, or any other challenges that come our way. And if we ever run into serious trouble again, well, we know from experience that sometimes karma and justice work much faster than you would expect. Sometimes justice comes in the form of airport security officers and lifetime airline bans. Sometimes the people who try to hurt innocent others end up hurting themselves much worse instead. Our Disney World vacation was absolutely magical and perfect, but the real magic was watching my son learn that he deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, and that his father will always be there to protect him no matter what. That life lesson was worth more than any first-class airplane seat or theme park ride could ever be. Karen Williams tried to throw my innocent son out of first class, but just 15 minutes later she lost her own seat and learned a lesson about consequences that she will never, ever forget. And Tommy and I got to fly first class to the vacation of our dreams, with an incredible story that we'll be telling and remembering for many years to come.